I had the opportunity to be at Life Point for 10 years now since the church has started, and occasionally I have the opportunity to speak. And there's something I always wanted to do over that 10-year period, and I finally did it first service. And I'm going to do it again. Good morning, Life Point. All right. Hey, glad that you are here this morning. Glenn started a series last week on this concept of the land between. What is the land between? The land between is, we're living over here, and this is normal. This is where we normally live. And for a lot of us, that means things are going well and things are going great. And for some of us, it may mean that, things aren't as great as they'd like to be, but it's normal. And we all like normal, right? And so we're over here. The land between is when all of a sudden, somebody pulls the rug out from under us, or the floor falls out from underneath us. And we enter this uncharted territory that we've not negotiated or navigated before. We've seen that on the news this past week or so in terms of Texas and how they have entered the land between. And it's true for most all of us. We all experience times in the land between. It may be the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, going away to college, divorce, miscarriage, moving to a new town, when your boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with you, or finding out that you have cancer. I was on my way to Myrtle Beach with 4 other guys from Life Point back in March, and we're driving along in the car, and all of a sudden my cell phone rings, and I see it's my doctor, and it's like, why is my doctor calling me? And he said, Greg, we just got the results from some of your testing, and your PSA is elevated. That's prostate-specific antigen. And it's elevated significantly enough that we need to do a biopsy. Well, I don't know a lot about medical terms, but I do know enough when you hear the word biopsy, that has to do with the C word. That has to do with cancer. At that moment, I entered the land between. He said, it's probably nothing, but we really should take a look at it. I'm really glad that I happened to be with a group of friends during that week, and then it was a couple weeks until I had my appointment, and after they did the biopsy, he said, it looks fine, everything looks fine, I'll get back to you in about a week. And you have these things that happen in your life where you've got this snapshot in your mind, you know exactly where you were when it happened. And I was walking out of the medical center that day at 4:30 in the afternoon when my phone rang again, and it was the doctor. And he said, yes, you do have prostate cancer, and you cannot not do anything. You've got to do something. So I had the surgery, and the prostate was removed, and said things look pretty good. And somewhere in the course of this, I misheard something. I didn't understand something, because then probably because I was on the drugs, when I was recovering in the hospital. And then I got the word that, we got all of it, but there was some that got into one of your lymph nodes. And so because of that, you're going to need to have hormone therapy, and we're going to need to do radiation, and that's scheduled to start in the end of October. So I am walking currently in the land between. And many times while navigating the land, allow me to say one other thing. So I had this great idea. It's like, so I had this surgery, no big deal. They said, 3 to 4 weeks you'll be off. But if you had a desk job, you could go back in a week. So I'm thinking, no problem. Okay, I don't have a desk job, so I'm going to be off for 3 to 4 weeks. But I had a list of books I was going to read and movies I was going to watch. Didn't read a book. Didn't read a page of a book. Didn't watch a movie. Laid on a love seat. Stared out the window. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And many times while navigating the land between, we feel like we're lost. Many times when navigating the land between, we enter a place we've never traveled before. It's like traveling somewhere for the very first time, and we don't have a GPS or a map with us. We're not sure how to navigate around this strange territory. Many times the land between seems like a desert. The terrain is dry and desolate. We may feel like nothing lives in the land between. Many times while traveling and navigating the land between, we're consumed by it. It's all we can think of. We have difficulty focusing on other tasks. Our mind is quickly drawn back to our problem. We find ourselves camping there mentally, wanting to escape, but thinking there's no way out. It's hard to try to move beyond our circumstances. Common companions on this journey are stress, worry, fear, anxiety, and doubt. And often in the early stages of navigating this land between, our thoughts are not rational. We find ourselves living without joy, living without hope, maybe even not wanting to live at all. Time seems to stop in the land between. A day seems like 1,000 years. Whereas before we had so many things to do, so many tasks to accomplish, and now even though the tasks remain, our interest in accomplishing them is gone. What once seemed so important is no longer important at all. Have you ever been there? Are some of you there now? Does the Bible have anything to say about those of us on how to navigate the land between? I believe it does. In the book of Job, we read of this man who experienced the land between. He was a prosperous man, chapter 1 tells us. He was well renowned in this whole East. He was very, very wealthy. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 camels, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, which means he had 1,000 oxen and 500 donkeys, and numerous servants. Then within one day, it was all taken away from him. Raiding parties came in and carried away many of the livestock. An incredible thunderstorm destroyed the rest of the livestock. A tornado struck down on a house that his children were having a party at, and they were all killed. And only about 4 of his servants survived and returned to tell him what had happened. Job was in the land between. And not too many days after that, all of a sudden Job was afflicted with sores from the very top of his head to the very soles of his feet, to the point that all he could do was sit in a pile of ashes with a broken piece of pottery and scrape those sores because he was so in pain and in such turmoil. The land between. And just like Job, when we enter the land between, we enter a crossroads. There are 2 paths we may choose when we begin this journey in the land between. The path to despair is very enticing. Woe is me is our mantra. We become self-consumed as we constantly reflect on our plight. The path can easily lead to isolation. We're left to run with our thoughts on this path. It's easy to think no one understands us, so we're better off alone. But the further we travel on this path, the narrower it gets, and the mountains and barriers begin to press in on us on all sides, and it gets darker and darker the further we go. Some who continue on this path never return. This is the path Job's wife encouraged him to take when she said in Job chapter 2, verse 9, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Oh, to have a wife like that. The worst moment in your life, and that's the best your wife can come up with. Wow, what an encourager. She had tunnel vision. She was so consumed by what had happened that she saw no way out. So she said to Job, you might as well curse God, die, and get this all over with, because there's no way out of this mess. But Job, in spite of the pain, refused to take this path. The primary theme of the book of Job is that of suffering. There's also a sub-theme connected with that, and that has to do with the concept of friendship and how friends can help us during this time of suffering. And that's going to be the focus of our reflection this morning. The land between is most successfully navigated with friends. That's the first entry on your note-taking guide in your program, if you'd like to follow along there. The wisdom of Solomon says it this way in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. 2 are better than 1. Why? Because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other out. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. The Beatles said it this way: I get by with a little help from my friends. Now, not everybody feels they need friends. I had the opportunity, I guess, to work at the post office for 27 years. And a number of characters that work at the post office, two memorable quotes. One guy said, I don't need friends, I've got a color TV. Really classy guy. And another would repeatedly say, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to make money. If I make some along the way, so be it. Great guys. Now, it's easy to be a friend when everything's going well. But what about when things get tough? How many friends do you have on Facebook? How many are casual friends? And how many are friends that when you're really up against it, when you really need somebody to help you, to support you, will be there for you, to help you walk through the struggles of life? Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. A friend's love is not conditional, and the purpose of a brother is to be there for us during difficult times, during times in the land between. Proverbs 18:24 says, one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I believe that's what we all long for this morning. Friends who stick closer than a brother. Sheila's sister called this past week and said, I want to come and spend some time with you guys this fall. But she didn't want to come to visit. She didn't want to come to sightsee. She lives in Phoenix. She said, I want to come to work because she knows we've got some things going on this fall. And it's like, wow. She would come from Phoenix, pay for the airfare to come and to work and to help us during our time of need. How can a friend who is closer than a brother or sister help us to navigate the land between? Because the reality is we don't all have brothers and sisters that are there for us at times like that. The book of Job reveals some characteristics. And let's look at them now in Job chapter 2, verses 11 through 13, where we read, when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, do you know this is the shortest man in the Bible? Bildad the Shuhite, very short, Shuhite. Not to be outdone by the second shortest man in the Bible, and that's Nehemiah. I digress. Back to the text. And Zophar the Naamathite. They heard about all the troubles that had come upon Job. They set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. They sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him. Why? Because they saw how great his suffering was. The first characteristic of a friend who is closer than a brother is that he's sympathetic. He or she is sympathetic. Sympathy is a compound word that means suffer with. Suffer with. So rather than allow a friend to suffer alone, they will come alongside of us and be with us in the midst of our suffering. These three friends talk and decide to do that. They decide to go together and to sympathize with Job. They come for the express purpose to suffer with Job. Empathy can only be demonstrated by someone who's experienced the same thing. But sympathy can be offered by anyone who deeply cares for the one who is suffering. We see his friends suffer with Job as they weep aloud, tear their robes, and sprinkle dust on their heads. Now, this seems kind of crazy to us in our culture today, but it's very familiar in Old Testament times, in ancient Near Eastern times. We see that took place during times of grieving and mourning. They literally suffered with Job, how long? 1 whole week, 7 days and 7 nights, sitting on the ground with their clothing torn and dust on their heads. When was the last time you did that for someone? When was the last time I did that for someone? When's the last time someone did that for you? I used to work with a guy who said, Don't come to me looking for sympathy. If you want sympathy, and then he pointed us to the dictionary and told us exactly where it could be found between two very unpleasant words. I must admit, I'm not the greatest one to do sympathy. I don't do sympathy that well myself. Why is that? What about you? I know for me, I feel like I've got things to do. There's a lot going on. I don't have time to go and to sit with somebody and listen. I feel if I'm not doing something, I'm wasting my time. Yet to the one who is suffering, what we're doing is absolutely wonderful. When I was in the hospital and at home recovering from surgery, I was moved beyond words as people would come to visit me and to spend time with me. Now, I'm not saying that this is for all of us to do for everyone at Life Point. It's not. We can't do that. Or not to do with everyone that we know. But all of us should have a sphere of friends, a group of friends, some people that we are there for to this level, to this degree, that we care for like that. I don't know about you, but my mother and grandmother used to send sympathy cards and get well cards. We don't tend to do that too much anymore. You know, a brief note to someone who is suffering or a family member has died, we don't tend to do that so much. Here's one thing I've learned through the years, and that's from my recent experience especially, and that's if I'm too busy to spend time with a friend who's suffering, guess what? I'm too busy. I'm too busy. One friend texted me and Sheila every day for the first 2 weeks, every day. And over the next several weeks, every couple days. And I felt so loved and so cared for. It was very moving. We can't all do that for everybody. And I believe, we can't be too aggressive with this whole thing too. We can't, making a phone call every day would be a little too intrusive. A text is just a gentle way to say, hey, how are you doing? I care about you. I'm praying for you, that kind of thing. And there's some people who are very private and really prefer the privacy. I didn't realize till afterwards that I was actually depressed. And that was why I was laying there looking out the window, for that period of time. But there are some people who just really are more private people. And so we shouldn't press in on their space and crowd them. But just because someone says no, that doesn't mean no, not ever in terms of us going to visit them. It means no, not at this time. In a week, give them a call, send a text, say, I'd like to stop by. Could I stop by this coming week? Very close to showing sympathy is comforting. A friend who is closer than a brother comforts. Job's friends came to comfort him. Anybody put a comforter on their bed last night or the night before? It's gotten a little cold, right? Why do we put a comforter on? To keep us warm. I believe what it means for us to comfort someone is that we speak words that warm the heart. We encourage them, and it warms a person emotionally as we care for them. When people ask me, how are you doing or how do you feel, it showed me they cared. And I'm not talking about somebody walking down the hallway at work, hey, how you doing, as they keep walking on down the hall. But someone that stops and squares off and says, hey, how you doing? And we make eye contact and they ask me how I'm doing. I know that they care. I know that they care. There are times people think they're well-meaning but say the wrong words. None of us have ever done that, right? Listen to Job's response to his friends in Job 16, 2-5. I have heard many things like these. You are miserable comforters, all of you. Will your long-winded speeches never end? What ails you that you keep on arguing? I also could speak like you if you were in my place. I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you, but my mouth would encourage you. Comfort from my lips would bring you relief. There are some words that do not comfort. We may think that we're helping someone, or we're not sure what to say, so we blurt out things like, he's in a better place. You'll get over it. At least she's not suffering anymore. You were only in your first trimester. God needed another angel. There are other jobs. Or I know just how you feel. There was a TV show that I saw decades ago, but this one sketch I have not forgotten. And it takes use of these words I know just how you feel. And the one guy made a statement in terms of how he felt. The other guy says, I know just how you feel. Nobody knows how I feel. I know just how you feel. Nobody knows how I feel. I know just how you feel. Nobody knows how I feel. And it's true. Nobody knows exactly how you feel. Because none of us has experienced life exactly the same. No one has your exact personality, your same set of emotions, your identical upbringing, your same relationships. Some of us have experienced the same loss as we may have, but no one truly knows our pain because our pain is unique to us. Our anxieties, exactly how we feel and what we are thinking. 3 weeks ago, I got word that a second cousin of mine was at Hershey Medical Center and that they didn't expect him to have too long. He's from Chambersburg. I hadn't seen him in 40 years, but I felt compelled to go. And so I went, and I was walking the hallways and coming close to the room. I saw a lady and a child and a man walking, and they were all crying. And I said, "Excuse me, do you happen to know Lex?" And she said, "Yeah, he's my dad." And I explained who I was, and she said, I'll walk with you. So we walked back, and she said they just took him off life support. And she proceeded then to walk in the room, and after a little bit, I saw her talk across the foot of the bed to someone, and a lady came out and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you came." I didn't even know who the lady was. I guess it was my other second cousin, his sister, but I hadn't seen her for 40 years, But she said, "Thanks so much for coming." And I looked, and there were actually about 10, 12 people in the room surrounding the bed. And I wasn't going to go in. I just stayed out in the hallway, and I just felt led to pray for the family and just to be there. And they had prayer at one point, and after a while, I just felt at peace to leave. Who's God calling you to comfort? Who is God speaking to you to comfort at this time? Third, a friend who is closer than a brother listens. What's that? Listens. The first 7 days and nights, Job's friends that were with him did it right. No one said a word. But as time passed and Job began to reflect on his plight, sharing his pain, his friends didn't have the grace to just listen. They felt the need to chime in and to set him straight. So they began to parse every statement that Job made. Now, one thing we need to realize, and that's this, that when someone is in the land between, they often allow their minds to run to places they don't normally go. It doesn't mean they believe everything they're saying. They're trying to process their pain. They're trying to process what's going on in their life, their misfortune. And they think that it is safe for them to verbalize what they're feeling and what they're thinking. They trust in you enough to share with you what's going on in their lives and to think that you will not judge them. But the very moment that we feel the need to correct them, to show them the error of their ways, we're likely building a wall between us that will do the relationship a whole lot more harm than good. Now, I'm not saying there's never a time where we should speak the truth and tell a friend the truth and speak up, but we need to be quick to listen and slow to speak. I think there's a reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth that has a whole lot more to do with than aesthetics. Just a thought. Listen to Job's words to his friends in 13:5. If only you would be altogether silent. For you, that would be wisdom. So many of us want to fix other people's problems. We try to fix them with our words, with our advice. Do you know anybody who's always trying to offer advice even when no one asks for it? One of the things I've learned over the years, if someone doesn't ask my advice, the best thing for me to do is just to be quiet because they're really not ready to hear my advice. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in her groundbreaking book back in the 60s on death and dying, shares a scenario that I've found extremely helpful. She describes a person who says this: I was sitting, torn by grief. Someone came and talked to me of God's dealings, of why it happened, of hope beyond the grave. He talked constantly. He said things I know were true, but I was unmoved. except to wish that he'd go away. He finally did. Another came and sat beside me. He didn't ask leading questions. He just sat beside me for an hour and more, listened when I said something, answered briefly, prayed simply, left. I was moved. I was comforted. I hated to see him go. For you see, when someone is struggling in the land between, they often are not looking for advice. They just want someone who will listen as they share the pain that they're going through. They want to know that someone loves them enough to take the time just to be with them and to listen. But listening's hard work, isn't it? Oh, to stay focused and to be intentional about that, to listening to what someone else is saying. It's so easy for me, at least for my mind, to wander. I'm thinking about my stuff, forgetting all about the person that I'm there to care for. To whom do you need to give the gift of listening today? We discover 4 more characteristics of a friend who is closer than a brother in Job chapter 6, verses 14 through 21. Anyone who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. But my brothers are as undependable as intermittent streams, as the streams that overflow when darkened by thawing ice and swollen with melting snow, but that stop flowing in the dry season and in the heat vanish from their channels. Caravans turn aside from their routes, they go off into the wasteland and perish. The caravans of Tema look for water. The traveling merchants of Sheba look in hope. They are distressed. Why? Because they had been confident they arrived there only to be disappointed. Now you too have proved to be of no help. You see something dreadful and are afraid. The 4th aspect that we see here of a friend who is closer than their brother is this, that he does not withhold kindness. He does not withhold kindness. Anyone who withholds kindness from a friend, it says in verse 14, forsakes the fear of the Almighty. In other words, when we have the opportunity to extend kindness, but instead choose to withhold kindness, we not only forsake our friend, but we also forsake the Almighty. We just came out of a series on the names of God. One of the names of God is El Shaddai, and that's the word that appears here. It's translated here, the Almighty. It's God, the all-powerful one, El Shaddai. We forsake the fear of God, the all-powerful one. We could be kind to someone. We have that potential within us. Not that we're unkind to them, but we do not extend the kindness that we could. Why would we do that? Why did I do that? It was 1978. We were building a home. I was only 24, and I was just doing some of the small stuff. And so one night, my dad and I were staining doors, and it was dark, and we had a door sitting on 2 horses and a can of stain beside it, and somehow I bumped the can of stain, and there was a spotlight underneath. And the can of stain fell on the spotlight, broke the light, and immediately the fire spread with the stain as it spread across the floor. My dad didn't know what happened. He turned, heard me screaming, came over, and he started stomping. His pants caught on fire. We finally got the fire out, got his pants off, threw his burning pants out the window, and stood there looking out the window. I said, well, I guess we're done for tonight. I went home to our apartment. My mom and dad stopped by, and Mom said, we're taking your father to the hospital. He thinks he burned his legs. You know, for whatever reason, we block things out of our memory sometimes. All that I remember is I went to see my dad one time. And the time that I went to see him, he hollered at me or wouldn't talk to me. I didn't know anything about depression at that stage of my life, but he was very clearly depressed. As I think on it now, to be in the hospital for 6 weeks alone, no matter what other things are going on with you, you would be depressed. And finally, my grandfather came to me and said, your father wants to see you. You know, to this day, I look at that with such regret. My dad was there helping me, and he's in a hospital helping me, And because of one situation that he was upset in his depression with me, I didn't go see him. The word that's translated kindness is the Hebrew word hesed, which we see here. Do not withhold kindness. So it can be translated kindness. Some other places in the Old Testament is translated loving kindness. Loving kindness means we are both loving and kind. Even when someone is not loving or kind to us. That's where I didn't get it. As followers of Jesus, we are called not to withhold kindness, but to extend kindness to one another. We are not just to be there when things are going well, but when a friend or family member is in the land between. From whom have you been withholding kindness? Job 6:15 reveals another characteristic of a friend who's closer than a brother, when it says, "But my brothers are as undependable as intermittent streams." Job uses this wonderful illustration of intermittent streams to communicate the principle of being undependable. An intermittent stream only exists whenever there's snow on the mountains or rain during the winter months. And so during the summertime, those streams are just dried up and it's just dry stream beds. But people would be traveling along, and in hopes of finding water, they would go off the path and journey to where they knew at one point there had been streams, but they got there and there was no water. The streams were undependable. We're called here not to be like that. Another trait of a friend who is closer than their brother is a person then who is dependable. Now listen to the words from Job 19. "My relatives have failed, and my intimate friends have forgotten me. Those who live in my house and my maids consider me a stranger. I am a foreigner in their sight. I call to my servant, but he does not answer. I have to implore him with my mouth. My breath is offensive to my wife, and I am loathsome to my own brothers. Even young children despise me. I rise up and they speak against me. All my associates abhor me, and those I love have turned against me. And my bone clings to my skin and my flesh, and I've escaped only by the skin of my teeth. Pity me, O you my friends, for the hand of God has struck me. Why do you persecute me as God does, and are not satisfied with my flesh?" When Job needed his friends most, they betrayed him. Which begs the question, if a friend betrays you, were they really a friend? If a friend is not there for you during the tough times in life, are they really a friend? Does your brother ever stop being your brother? Does your sister ever stop being your sister? For you see, a friend is dependable. We would say that a true friend would say, "I knew you'd come. I knew you would be here during a difficult time of our life." How about you? Are you dependable? When you tell someone you'll do something, do you follow through? Do you always do it? Or are you only dependable until something better comes along? Two of the greatest baseball players of all time were Ty Cobb and Shoeless Joe Jackson. Ty Cobb had a career batting average, over 20 years of 366. Incredible. Anybody to have a 366 batting average for 1 year is phenomenal, let alone a career of 20-some years. Shoeless Joe wasn't far behind with 356. One thing they had in common, which was very rare for Ty Cobb, is that they were friends, because Ty had a reputation and Ty didn't have the most friends. But Shoeless Joe was counted as one of them. Then came the Black Sox scandal in 1919, when the accusations were made that the World Series was thrown. And 8 of the White Sox were accused of throwing the game, consequently changed to the Black Sox. They were acquitted in a court of law, but the Commissioner of Baseball banned all of them from baseball for life. Fast forward 25 years later, Shoeless Joe owns a business in Greenville, South Carolina. And one day, Ty Cobb walks in, and they kind of glance at each other out of the corner of their eyes and things. But Joe looks down, just polishing the counter. Ty walks up to the counter and makes a transaction. Not a word said. And finally, at the end of the transaction, Ty says, "Joe, don't you know me? Don't you recognize me?" And he says, "Yeah, I know you, Ty, but these days a lot of people don't want me to recognize them. So I wasn't sure." Friends are dependable. They don't bail out when times get tough. A friend who is closer than a brother is also helpful. In Job 6:21, Job says, "Now you too have proved to be of no help." Do you remember this commercial from not too long ago? Yeah, are you a friend who is helpful, or are you like these guys? Here are some tips on how to help a friend who's in the land between. Don't say, "Let me know if I can help you." They're already in a dry and desolate place. Don't put the onus on them. Take the initiative to contact them. Do be specific when you offer help. Don't say, "I want to bring a meal over sometime." Do say, "I want to bring a meal over. Will this Tuesday work for you?" Do say, "I want to cut your grass. Can I come over after work on Thursday and mow your lawn?" Do say, "Can I watch the kids this Friday night so you can get out?" Friends who are closer than a brother are helpful, and they're also not afraid. Not afraid. The second half of Job 6:21 is, you see something dreadful and are afraid. So here we see the opposite being true. A friend who is closer than a brother is not afraid. A big part of the reason I believe that I was not devoted to my dad during this time is because I was afraid of him. The time he yelled at me when I was in there, and so I was afraid, and I backed off, and I didn't want to have anything to do with him. I was afraid. Yet 1 John 4:18 says, "Perfect love casts out fear." The word that's translated perfect means complete or mature. And the word that's translated fear is the same word from which we get our word phobia. So we could really translate this verse, mature love removes our phobias. Mature love loves no matter what someone has done to us in the past. Because mature love chooses to love, to no longer hold anything against someone who's done anything against us. Love is not a feeling. Love is a choice. Love is a decision. And we decide to love. And when we love completely, the love removes our fear. A friend who is closer than a brother is not afraid because his love is mature and not controlled by our fears or phobias. May so much to say, so little time, right? We may be afraid of seeing someone beginning to wither away physically. We may not want to face the realization that a friend is going to die. So it's easier for us to walk away from them, to avoid the shock, to avoid the pain. But when we love maturely, when we love completely, our fears subside. Mature love is more concerned about the other person than about ourselves. Put yourself in their shoes. What would you want if you were the one in the land between? Would you want to be alone on a desert road, left to struggle on your own? Would you want to die alone? Or would you want a friend to come alongside you? So there's a checklist for us of what it means to be a true friend, to be a friend who is closer than a brother. Who are you that kind of a friend to? How many people are you that kind of a friend to? We got a picture here of a trampoline, and I got a question that was posed to me by a professor in graduate school. And the question is this: who's holding your trampoline? Who's holding your trampoline? And he went on to say that, that we need about 12 people in our lives to keep us up, to hold us up during difficult times. Some of those people can be family members, but some of them need to be people who are not family members, who are there for us, to support us, to hold us up, to support us, and to keep us afloat. 12 friends who are true friends. I don't care how many Facebook friends you have. How many friends will come and help you in the middle of the night? Who will be there for you when you're really up against it, when your back's against the wall, when you really need someone to support you? If you don't have 12 true friends, what do you do? Here's 3 suggestions. Number 1, pray. Pray. Pray and ask God to lead you to friends. Number 2, be a friend. You know, the best way to make friends is to first and foremost do the things that a friend would do for other people. So be a friend is second. And then third, join a life group. There are numbers of people here who, when they first came to Life Point, they didn't know a lot of people. So they got connected with a life group. And they now would look back and say, I've got some of the best friends I've ever had in my life. Yes, people I could call in the middle of the night. But it's important for us to take the initiative. If you want to be a friend, and if you want to make friends, and if you want to have a group of friends to support you, I want to encourage you to take the initiative. Connect with a life group. Be a friend to others. I believe those will be great steps in this process of being the kind of person that God wants you to be. Let us pray.